Okay. Well, thank you all very much for attending this session. The title of my presentation today is Value Chain and Innovation Pathways in the Transition to a Sustainable Bioeconomy. It is still a work in progress, and it's part of my dissertation at the University of Bonn. This is the structure of the presentation, but I will jump directly into the introduction. We all know that the bioeconomy is considered as one of the strategies to tackle global warming and other environmental challenges we are dealing with in the Anthropocene. But the fact of moving into a bioeconomy is not sustainable per se. There are several trade-offs that come especially in the use of first-generation biomass due to potential market-driven changes, including increasing the food prices, land use change, and other environmental side effects. But what do we need to produce a really sustainable transition? We need what we call a bioeconomy upgrading. That is a process that is built upon eco-innovation and means moving from the mere substitution of fossil for bio-based inputs and the use of first-generation technology to the adoption of advanced feedstocks and leading technologies that minimize the risk of this environmental trade-off on a global basis and on the long run. Here I included some examples referring to new technologies that allow to more value added in the products, new biomass sources, the adoption of a circular behavior, and more efficient biomass productions in terms of quantity and quality. But a process like this, a process of eco-innovation like this, won't happen without drivers. An intensified process of eco-innovation, we say, is not self-enforcing. Why? Because markets might not be yet developed upstream or downstream, because there are risks, and because doing R&D is expensive and there might be some costs. So there are clear drivers, more straightforward drivers that had to do with government regulations or consumer requirements. But in this paper, what we ask is about more endogenous drivers to the value chain and the role that value chains can play to foster this sustainable transition where we are claiming. So our research questions are: what value chain attributes are more conducive to a process of bioeconomy upgrading in terms of creating the enabling environment? Which value chain features are associated with this process of intensified innovation in the bioeconomy? And how, since we know that value chains play a role in distributing cost and benefits among participants, we ask, how can these value chain characteristics affect welfare distribution in this transition? To do this, we will present a conceptual framework that links these both worlds, the value chain features and the innovation, in the context of the bioeconomy. And to do this, we will present a typology of bio-based value chain. And through that typology, we'll try to get hints on what are the main characteristics that are associated with a bioeconomy upgrading. And then we will present a discussion on the potential welfare impacts of a bioeconomy upgrading given these value chain features that are more likely to produce that. Just a short mention to some theoretical aspects. We dig first into the interactions of the value chain body of theory and the concept of innovation in a more general way. And we explored which value chain features operate as eco-innovation drivers and which value chain features are preferred by innovators in the process of the building of their supply chains. What we want to get are categories of analysis in terms of value chains and in terms of innovation that help us to understand that in the context of the bioeconomy. Here are our main categories. I won't stop here for the sake of time. We can get back here in the Q&A session, but We have 4 characteristics of the innovation process and the technologies involved, and we have characteristics of the value chain and value chain features that are selected. What I can say very shortly is that this characteristic of innovation and the technologies involved help to shape the value chain, help to structure the value chain, condition how the value chain takes place. And at the same time, several value chain features will have an impact on the rate of innovation. So what we say is that there is a process of co-determination between the shaping of the value chain and the innovation process. We move now into the core of the presentation, that is the value chain typology. We want to be as comprehensive as possible in terms of the models we identified, and we will present them in terms of actors, functions, and the process of adding value to final consumers. That is how we understand a value chain. So here we have 6 models. We identified 6 models. The first model is the simplest one. When you have a biomass producer, that could be a corn farmer or a sugarcane farmer, which sells biomass through market mechanisms to, for example, a bio-based processing company, that could be an ethanol company, for example. Then we have an industrial application that might be the blending between ethanol and naphtha. And then finally, we have the users that could be the car users, for example. This is the more basic model we can find. And it's very suitable for first generation technologies and biogas in some cases. Model 2 is a variant of the third one, and it implies that biomass producers are integrating forward into the bio-based processing. They have biomass available, they produce biomass, and they want to add value to that biomass. So they integrate forward, they associate. We see many farmers associations, many cooperatives that are trying to do this, to move a step forward and add more value. Then a third model that is also very common in the bioeconomy, that has a very geographical focus. It's about an agro-industrial company that processes some sort of biomass and uses part of that biomass or residues from that process to do a bio-based processing. Generally is producing, for example, energy. So they use wood chips, or I don't know, or peanut shells or manure to produce, to co-generate heat and electricity, and they use part of that electricity and the rest they sell it to the network, for example. This is a very common model. And when we move to model 4, you see here a core structure that is very similar to the first one, but there is a new actor here, which is a biotech company or a company that has high skills in terms of R&D. Because when we move to products that are more complex, let's say here included, for example, bioplastics, or feedstocks that are more complex, let's say wood chips or energy crops, where extracting the lignin, it's a more complex process, or even more complex processes like molecular farming, when you use crops to generate certain proteins or components that will be part of an industrial process. You cannot solve, the bio-based processor cannot solve that by itself. It needs a partner, biotech company that provides the platform to do that. You need to seek those capabilities there in the market. And we move from more turnkey technologies, as we might have here, to more tailor-made technologies. Model 5 is a model that is very common among startups and also consolidated companies in the context of, for example, synthetic biology. That is one of the workhorses of the bioeconomy and will be in the future, where the biomass is not a high volume process, it's more a high value, low volume process, and the biomass enters Here, to produce, for example, a fermentation process that will lead to create a synthetic component, for example, in the case of food or nutraceutical or cosmetics. And finally, we have a sixth model that is not strictly based on biomass processing, but is more based on a strictly biotech process. When we have two companies, one that is an industrial company that knows, that has the knowledge of an industry, and then we have a biotech company that has, or an R&D company that has research capabilities, and they put something, each of them, in a partnership, in an alliance, in a joint venture to enter a new market. And this is very common in the bio-input industry. We see many joint ventures. In the biosimilar or biopharmaceutical, when we have a pharmaceutical company associated with a synthetic biology company, and also in the next generation of seed traits that are based on gene editing, it's very common to see this. In general terms, and with the risk of doing a simplification, but in general terms, we move from known and mature technologies, where in Schumpeterian terms, we have a process of diffusion and adaptation of the agent, and we have a focus on biomass, efficiency, logistic, where local processing of the biomass is crucial, to processes that are more complex, that deal with DNA editing or enzyme or microbial platforms, where we have an innovation process where business and science are really related, and where IPR start to be an issue. And of course, we face less environmental trade-off in this more complex application, but we have more risks, we have higher capital requirements, of course, we have systemic characteristics. We profit from the association with other agents in the value chain, and of course, we have an intensified rate of innovation. What all this implies in terms of the value chain features that we are looking for. This is the discussion that comes next. In terms of governance schemes, I will go here through the 4 categories that I presented earlier. In terms of governance schemes, what we see is shorter and tighter value chains and increasing forms of vertical coordination. Could be contracts, could be vertical integration, but some form of coordinations are there, because markets need to be developed, because we're dealing with more complex feedstocks that are highly specific, because we are dealing with technologies that are systemic in nature, and even we need, since we are speaking about more value added, we need to be closer to the consumer. So this is what we expect in terms of governance scheme. In terms of industry structure, what we see is bigger firms, fewer relevant actors with high capabilities, and probably in large market share and potentially more concentration. This is a process that we already saw in the ag biotech industry. Because of what? Because the capital requirements, the need to deal with risks and sunk costs, and the need to deal with the issue that these processes are long and extending time. In terms of collaboration among firms, we can expect higher levels of collaboration and cooperation, alliances, partnerships, joint ventures. Here it's crucial not only to create the value, but also protect the value and share that value added and share that knowledge with others to scale up. So we see more cross-licensing, for example. And in this process, we are moving from Turkey to tailor-made technologies. So the need for collaboration is increased. And finally, in terms of leadership and firm capabilities, what we expect is, given the stronger incidence of IPR and given the increased rate of innovation, we are dealing with leader firms that drive this innovation, and core innovation capabilities start becoming crucial. So to end up with this presentation, we spoke about the potential welfare effects. We know that we need innovation to secure an environmentally sustainable transition, or at least minimizing those trade-offs. But we cannot leave aside the social sustainability aspects. So it's okay to ask about these welfare impacts. We do not have today enough evidence to provide an empirical analysis, but we can outline a discussion and some hypotheses of what are the points to look for in these social sustainability aspects. In terms of governance schemes, one of the discussion is, are small farmers going to be included in these upgraded value chains? There is evidence in the past from upgraded value chains that manage to include small farmers, but also we might face some form of exclusion, especially when small and large farms coexist. Also, who will pay for the additional environmental compliance requirement? Are these costs going to be pushed upstream toward farmers? And also, if we are going to see more contractual schemes and more vertical coordination, is this going to benefit farmers or not? The evidence in the literature is not clear. It's very product and context specific. Regarding industry structure, what we might see are more buyer-driven value chains led by big firms. And this has to do with the geographical redistribution of the benefits. Is the bioeconomy going to replicate things that happens in different industry related to the developed countries keeping the benefits of innovation and keeping the benefits of more downstream activities like marketing, brands, commercialization, and leaving the role for the least developed countries to deal with more upstream tasks? Is that going to happen? That is one of the discussions. The effect of concentration on prices. Are prices going up due to concentration or not? And also the effects of concentration on innovation. The role of these bigger firms with higher market shares, will this foster innovation or not? In terms of collaboration among firms, as I said, there is a place for startups, even in this context of bigger firms. The issue is, what countries need to promote these startups, and are these small firms, these startups, going to be absorbed by bigger firms in the end? We could think that on the long run, this is a process that might happen. The effects of collaboration between firms and cross-licensing, this might create forms of exclusion in terms of the technology, and also the role of SMEs and in transferring knowledge and technology to smallholders, that they can play a role there. Finally, we have these firm capabilities and this increased rate of innovation. We all agree that technology is key for a convergence from least developed countries to developed countries, but will this process take place? How technology will be transferred? Are farmers going to be benefit from increased productivity? And also we can ask about consumers. Are every consumer going to be able to pay for these new and better products? Well, to close, I'm close to 20 minutes right now. So what we present here aims to be a comprehensive approach to the bioeconomy, and hopefully we want that this paper to guide future empirical research. In terms of limitation, when you do a systematization like this, you always fall into some simplifications. There might be country specificity, case specificities that are not included in this framework. Also, all the presented models will coexist in the future. There is no one-to-one substitution. We will see all these models in the future, but of course we expect an increased rate of innovation. And finally, we need to be careful because some trade-off may not be completely ruled out in this process. There may still persist. So thank you. That's it. I'm open to questions.